a parent showing up in a school setting, semi-regular, whatever, can improve that grade point average a bit because them teachers are a little more dialed in but they are dialed in for all the kids because you're in there,
right?
You're watching or you're helping out for your child, but everybody is benefiting from the fact that there's somebody in the room. And I think it's just really important for men, especially black boys, to see black men.
But one of the things that I had that I noticed was my father drank a lot. I called him a functional alcoholic. He could drink and he could still go to work or whatever. So I'm drunk a few times, but that was pretty common in the Caribbean setting. Friday nights you get off work, you don't come home straight. You stop by what you guys call a bar. We call it a rum shop. So we lost a beautiful home because of alcohol. So welcome, brothers. This has been a long time since we've been talking about getting together and having this discussion together. The topic for today is raising black boys or raising black boys into black men. And it's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. And there's many reasons that we could talk about this, and we're going to get into it. But one of the obvious reasons is somebody's going to say, well, why raising black boys and not just raising raising all boys? Well, the first part of that is that we're all black. And we all have boys. So for us, it's a pretty obvious topic, right? But there's some other things a little bit deeper than that too, than just the fact that we're all black. But there's some unique things that we believe in raising black young men into men that we think is important enough for us to spend some time talking about. So we're just talking about in the kitchen, literally around the kitchen table. This is the kitchen cabinet of Terry and Deshaun and Andre. So let's begin with some introductions. We'll start with you, Andre, and then work our way in. Tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about your family so that we can get grounded and get started.
Absolutely. So Andre Sims, married to Kathy Sims, 35 years. Next month will be 36 years. Our son turns 33 next month. And we only have the one son. We have two kids, son and daughter, but we have the one son. I think, first of all, I would like to identify the chronology of those numbers. I've been married 35. My son is 33. When you talk about black men and their boys, sometimes there's an assumption that there was a shotgun wedding or a necessity or whatever the case might be. This was a planned pregnancy after marriage. That's where I want to start. And my parents were together 43 years before my father passed. My parents were never divorced. I grew up with a father in the home that was my biological father. So that's part of my family history. And then I think the last thing I'll say as an introduction is that my father graduated high school at 16 in Detroit and went to the armed services at 18 to the Air Force. And they used to have GI families at that time. And so the host family, the Sauves, was the family that my father went to on the weekends, and he told them he wanted to learn the language. We were just having a conversation about Terry's daughter learning Japanese. And so the Sauves, at that point, with 4 generations of physicians, and they told him every time you come, you're not allowed to speak English. So my father learned the language the first year of his 4 years in Europe and came back to Michigan and got accepted to Michigan State. And knew he only had 4 years of the GI Bill. So he finished his 4-year undergrad in 3 and his 2-year master's in 1. So that's the kind of father as a black boy from myself, the model I had coming into my adulthood. So,
thank you. Wonderful. Deshaun.
So I'm Deshaun Quinn. I like where you started. September, it'll be 20 years married to Nicole Quinn. And it's funny that I think about it. My parents got divorced right before their 20th. I came from a home of 4 boys. And when my parents got divorced, because my father was in the home up until I was 15. And I would say that that's probably one of the most critical times. A little bit of history as well. My mother, Brenda Quinn, was brought to Seattle by her father, who was in the military. Once he got out, he went back to Johns Island, South Carolina, picked her up, and raised her by his own, and that is a legacy. So when the four of us were in the home, my mother was a disciplinarian, serious, but she kept us together, 4 boys. And now I have 2, 15 and 10. Still learning, but loving every day.
Terry.
My name is Terry White, and I'm going to take us to another side of the coin. And I like how you started as well, so I will say that I am married to the beautiful Danae White, and we have been together for 26 years. I have been divorced and remarried. Fortunately, I figured it out, and that remarry was to the same woman. We have 5 kids. 2 are boys, 3 are boys. I say 3.5 because I helped raise my nephew who found his way to my house quite a bit, quite often. I did not know my father growing up, and it turned out the father that I thought was my father wasn't. But my father was in the military, surprisingly. My mom ended up here in the state of Washington following her sister, who was married to a man who was in the military. So that military migration is real. And I would say this. I met my father, my biological father, at 56 when I found out he was in the military. He didn't know I existed until I showed up. I learned a lot from him historically about where I come from, which is why I sought him out. I wanted to be able to tell my kids where they came from. But not having that father figure in your life, you search out and try to find folks who you perceive are doing the things that you want to be about, and you start to mimic them. But you also learn how to pick and choose. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. This is what I'll do with my boys. And I think it was important from where I came from to acknowledge to my kids that I don't have a blueprint. So that please give me some grace as I go through this. I'm going to make some mistakes, a lot sometimes. But the goal here is for you to end up doing this a little better than even I did, and that I do it better than the absentee father that I had.
Thank you, Terry. But I'm Grantley, and the host of this podcast, and I grew up in a home with 5 sisters and 2 brothers. My parents were not married. We were divided, the 8 of us, between 3 different fathers. And I'm the 7th of 8. So me and my younger sister, the last 2 from my father. And he was around some of the times and not all of the time. And it wasn't always a most pleasant experience. I really idolized my father growing up, even though he was not, looking back at it, not really a good example. But like you said, looking for that father figure and looking for that person that you hope will be there for you and give you direction. And he really wasn't there most of the time. I also noted in my community that it was pretty common for many homes not to have fathers in them or fathers very often. So a lot of women raising boys and girls and doing an excellent job. My mother raised us very well. I wouldn't complain about that. And then even when we went to church, the majority of the people at church were women. And there were some men there who were married as well. But the majority were women, and that's where I found, first of all, men who were willing to take me on and teach me things was at church. And then we had some teachers at school who were male teachers. And obviously they knew the situations where we came from. Mm-hmm. And some of them took interest in us. and tried to teach us things that that they thought we needed to know, or they would challenge us into doing things and not doing things. But I think, you know, for me, I had a fortunate opportunity at the age of 17 to meet a gentleman from the United States who was passing through Barbados on his way to another island to see his daughter, and he challenged me to attend university in the United States. And he became, to me, eventually what I consider to be my dad. So I consider him to be my dad. I have a biological father, but I have a father who taught me what it was to be a man. A stranger that I met at age 19. Well, he became the one that then began to instill in me those godly principles and how to live and how to behave and things to do and not to do, and challenged me. Even when we were having challenges in our marriage, he would intervene. So that's just the beginning here. We don't have to get into it, but the thing about us then is not only were we brought up in different homes, but we all have sons, right? I have one son, Ryan, who was in the Air Force. Tamina and I have been married for 38 years. In 2 weeks, June 9th, will be 38 years. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things. What are some of the challenges that we face in our society today that make it really important for this topic to be discussed about raising black boys into black men? I think you touched on some of them already, but let's sort of delve into them a little bit more. What are some of the challenges? Who wants to go first?
If I can jump in, because hopefully I don't get too deep, but I didn't talk a little bit about like my dad. My dad was a Black Panther. Yes. He married my mom when she was 16 and he was 18. He raised us. He was a strong personality, and what we call old school, right? And I think at a younger age, just kind of quick to anger. He would go to work, be gone all day, maybe all night. But he always said he'd get him to go to work. He'd be there for sports. I mean, I really looked up to my dad. And there were things, legacy-wise, I can tell that he inherited from his father. And not unlike your story, he met his dad, when he was an adult. And actually his name isn't Quinn, it's Jordan. And his father didn't want anything to do with him. He had anger issues. And so when you think about, and I'll just be real clear here, like one of the things that me and my three brothers did is how are we going to raise our kids when we have kids? Yes. And one of the things that we remembered was in those instances, and there were plenty, you can never forget how you felt. You wanted a protector. Somebody that you look up to, and you ask yourself the question, if he loved me, then why does he allow his anger to get to a place? I'm going somewhere with this. And I've always had a good relationship, but we could have been a lot closer. I'm sure I picked up all his health habits, high blood pressure, but also it's kind of due to the anger. And it was funny, a couple years ago, which is amazing. I have a good relationship with my father. I love him. I honor him as much as I can. I got to thank him and acknowledge and forgive him for his survival behaviors. And you learn, like, generationally, the example he saw, maybe he was just replicating that. But then my father went from graduating Garfield, going to the University of Washington, becoming the first African-American cameraman at Cairo, highest-ranking African-American in the insurance business. And I say all that, I'm proud of it, but the whole point is the pressures of being the first or the one in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe that gets internalized and brought home.
Mm-hmm.
And being the recipient of that, I wanted to break some generational curses by, one, showing my children how to deal with their anger.
Mm-hmm.
Two, living a healthier lifestyle, communicating, because that's another generational thing is you don't have to be tough. We need wellness. And when we have struggles, let's talk about them. And so in some ways, I also thank my father for that as well. And I remember for a while, I was pretty upset when they got divorced and he distanced himself. And then I went away to Morehouse. And I just remember really thinking about like, why isn't he here? Why isn't, but there are reasons, but it wasn't until I forgave him for the situation did I actually get to connect with him and talk to him and learn even more of the history about our family and his experiences. And then I'll close with this. It's funny when you talk about forgiveness and grace. Remember I told you about my father not really knowing his father. He called me and my brothers because his father had passed in Portland. And this was kind of the first time he said, hey, regardless of what's going on, can we all go down there and can you support me? So we go to the funeral and his family said, we don't recognize y'all in the family. You're not his son.
Wow.
And it was a time to kind of bond on our connection and kind of renew our love and respect for one another. And then also just reflecting on his experience because his father was never in the home. Again, like really focusing on generational things that we want to change and how that ties to raising boys. I'm very intentional about that process. And again, a lot of it's coming from those experiences of wanting somebody to talk to when I was in high school or my senior year or picking colleges or, and that support. I had to kind of find it with the broader family that was around me and kind of figure it out. Like you all said, it's like we have this extended family that come in and help. But again, I go back to that forgiving him for survival behaviors. That moment, I mean, he cried and thanked me in that moment. I'm glad he did it. He perceived it well, but it was a bonding. It was another bonding moment for us, and we are as close as we can be. He knows he's always there for me. If I need something, he'll be there. But I'm so proud of like his legacy. So sorry to go on, but I mean it's kind of it's one of those things I hold on to.
Well, I think you said something that I think I pick up on is this whole, like I tell my boys that not having a blueprint and how I'm going to try to figure this out with you. And I need you to communicate with me. Well, that hurt. That didn't feel good. But I love how you came in and apologized and we moved on. And I love how you show love after the moment. Like it's still okay. But something you said and you kind of allude to without even getting to is this whole thing of your father did better than his father did.
That's right.
For you, even in the struggle.
That's right.
And whether he said it to you or not, his expectation for you to be better and do better. I mean, we kind of want that. I think it's ironic that all these athletes out here are always talking about how they were better than the generation before them. But as parents, they always want their kids to be better, to do better in all those areas. The contradiction is something. But I think you said it. We all have been saying the thing I look at in terms of finding father figures and taking, especially for black boys who are, I mean, the world is biased anyway in how we look at each other. across the spectrum. But how folks look at black boys started from a place of you're just chattel. That's what you are. You do things for me, and I don't pay you, feed you so that you can stay healthy enough to do more things for me. And then having that how does that evolve into a place where you're looked at as valuable, respected, trustworthy, productive, professional, and that's, I think, the things we're always trying to figure out how to work on. And when you come from a generation where they separated us, they took you from your children, you didn't get the chance to figure out how to have a bond, to let alone then try to figure out how to take care of a home without these tools that other folks had growing up, to then trying to pass that on to the next generation to do it even just a little bit better, and hope that keeps going. And I think that's the biggest thing to me was, I don't have a father figure that I look at and go, this is the thing I cherish or whatever. And it was so common that I never missed it. I just didn't even, I'm missing a dad, and it was never there for me. So that wasn't the reason that spurred me on. But how I grew up and how I was treated and how I was viewed, trusted or not trusted, depending on what my abilities were, those were things that I was really trying to make sure I passed on to my kids. You're going to be looked at a certain way. You're going to be judged before you walk in the room. You need to show up a certain way. I know you kind of alluded to some of this, Grantley, is how you walk into a place, how you sit up front, how you raise your hand, how you engage in conversations is going to matter for you, let alone how you show up when the police car pulls you over.
Yeah.
And make sure that music and that sound goes down quickly, and get your hands where you
10
can
and 2.
see them.
Yeah.
But that's all the stuff that you hope and pray that it gets easier and easier as the generations go. And I think it is in a lot of ways. But there's so much more to this that we were behind on. But I love the spectrum of where we are on that, and how you can see the hope of what we can all get to.
Absolutely.
As a community of black folks, of black men. There's a place to go, and I think that's the thing I try to pass to even, beyond my boys. I have my boys who are now becoming mentors to other kids, and to show them what's possible if you do these things. That's becoming the real thing. Is this? I have this group that I get to hang out with, beyond even you all, that I'm so proud of, that I get to show other kids who look like us and say, this is what you can be. And it's beyond that whole thing where King County talks about the opportunity to thrive, which is more than survive.
Right.
Thrive.
Yeah.
Thrive is not, it's more than just I ate
Just
today.
just barely getting along.
It's
A little bit more than just barely getting along.
You're supposed to enjoy life.
Yeah.
So how we get our kids to that place, so it's commonplace and it's not an anomaly,
Right.
I think is the biggest thing that I caught on to was, hey, that he's saying something I need to hear, or he's doing something I need to do for myself and for my family and for their families.
Right, to come. Andrea, anything to add?
Again, just dealing with the spectrum of kind of, the dynamic of the four of us and our childhood. So I think one thing I picked up on what Terry was saying is, this 10 and 2 o'clock is what Deshaun said, and what does it mean to be black and to be pulled over? When I moved to Federal Way, the African-American population was 7%. The chief of police is a Korean believer, Andy Wong, and he's just a very real guy. He's just a very, very straightforward type of person, and so he would provide the statistics on traffic stops. And the traffic stops of African Americans in Federal Way at that time was 31%, but they made up 7% of the population.
Yeah.
And I was saying, what? How do we explain this?
That's
And so then he came up with this Chief of Police Advisory Council that had people of color on it, as a way to address the facts. This is not fiction. This is not people of color just throwing out information that has not been substantiated. This is coming from the police themselves. So I just remember growing up, my father explaining to me what it meant for him to have to come up to the school because of my behavior.
Yeah.
And that he was not opposed to coming to the school, but his favorite phrase, don't have me coming up there being loud and wrong. If you call me, you better have your ducks in a row. I better know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. Don't let nobody tell me, surprise me with something you didn't tell me before I left work and came to your school. But recently I had a high school friend of mine pass away. And we were really close. Donnell, myself, and Ricky, we were really close. And so it was an unexpected heart attack kind of thing. So I flew back to Chicago I guess it's been about 7 months ago now. So a lot of the high school crew came through. I've been out of high school, I hate to say it, 40 years. so some of those guys I haven't seen literally in decades. And one of the common themes at the repast after the celebration of life was, dude, I always admired the fact that your father, when he came to the school, it wasn't just about you. It was about every black boy in the school.
Right.
And most of my friends didn't have a father in the home. Many knew of their fathers, but didn't have relationships with their fathers. Yeah. And so it was always a big deal when Dr. Sims came to the school, because he was coming and something was going to get worked out. And it was going to help all the black males.
That's right. That's right.
You know, my PE teacher, and I'll pass the mic. My PE teacher, Mr. Paquette, decided that instead of calling him Mr. Paquette, I needed to call him Sir. And I communicated that my father doesn't require me to call him sir, but I am required to call you with a title. So I choose Mr. Perquet. And he kicked me out of his class. And I circled back about 10 minutes later and said, I just want to be clear that I called you by a title out of respect. And because I didn't say sir, you kicked me out of class. Blah, 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 blah. I don't care who you are, da, da, da. So I went to the payphone, called my dad, and by the time he got to the office, all 14 black males in my PE class were in the office, 14 of us, because he was requiring of all of us. But of those 14, I was the only one that had a father I could call.
I like that.
You know, I grew up watching my dad stand for black boys, not just his son. And it taught me that's how I need to live my life, not just for the one that biologically belongs to me, but the ones in the community, the neighborhood, the church, and so on and so forth. So
I think that's really important. Is you're raising more than just yours.
Yes.
At that point, I know when my middle son Kendall was in about the 6th grade, I was coaching his football team, and I used to show up at the school quite a bit. And he would be like, "Why are you always in here?" And it was about
you and I had that conversation, right?
About more than him. But I remember he was taking care of business. He would come to the car and go, "Okay, before you go in there, I have a B on this, but I've already talked to the teacher. She missed a piece. The A, it's going to be corrected tomorrow.
Right.
So you don't have to go in and do all that stuff you do. Right. Just wait it out.
Yeah.
I'll show you the A tomorrow."
Right.
And I had to explain to him, half the time I'm in there, it's not for you. It's for the other kids that are on your team. Yeah. And the same point I'm making there was because half of them don't have somebody to show up for them. Yeah. Even the ones who have mothers and fathers, because of the predicament they're in terms of their work, they're not really allowed to go. I remember my mom saying, when I come to your school, I'm not making money. They're not giving me some type of grace thing. So she was more like, don't let me have to come up here at all.
Right.
I'm losing money and you messing up.
Right.
But the thing is, for all of us, and we used to joke about this, but there's some truth in the fact that a parent showing up in a school setting, semi-regular, whatever, can improve that grade point average a bit because them teachers are a little more dialed in because they see you are.
Right.
But they are dialed in for all the kids because you're in there.
Right.
You watching or you helping out for your child, but everybody is benefiting from the fact that there's somebody in the room. And I think it's just really important for men, especially black boys, to see black men.
Absolutely.
In those types of settings. You get to aspire to something. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. I want to give back like that.
Right.
And you start to see that play itself out over and over. That stuff matters a lot.
Yeah, especially when you grow up in communities where most of the homes don't have a father in them, right?
Yeah.
Because as the
Commonplace.
black boys are growing up, we're growing up, you're not seeing that father figure. You're not having that father figure there, right? So then who stands in for you and who stands in the community for you? Right. You know, you guys talked about, you know, one of the challenges when you raising your sons, you know, the things that you said you didn't want to do as fathers, right? Mm-hmm. And I had my list too, you know, things I didn't want to do as fathers. I wanted my son to grow up in a home with both parents, you know, to do good in school. You know, my mother always insisted that we did good in school. I mean, it was, I call my mother the benevolent dictator, right? She was, you guys probably identify with that, right? She instilled value, she instilled purpose, she instilled everything in you, but she expected you to do what you were supposed to do, right? Which is to go to school. And I remember when I was 16, I told my mother I wanted to quit school because I was just angry. I didn't want to go to school. And she said, as long as you live in this house, you will do what I tell you to do. And your job right now is to finish school. So, end the discussion, right? You know, but you need that, right? In the typical home, if you had a father, the father would have been having that discussion, right? But she had to do that discussion. But one of the things that I had that I noticed was my father drank a lot. I called him a functional alcoholic. He could drink and he could still go to work or whatever. So I'm drunk a few times, but that was pretty common in the Caribbean setting. You know, Friday nights you get off work, you don't come home straight. You stop by what you guys call a bar, we call it a rum shop in the neighborhood, and all the fellas are hanging out there and they're playing dominoes, and some of them are spending the money they shouldn't be spending. Some of them are doing whatever, but you know, they drank a lot and listened to cricket and did all this stuff. And he was also a womanizer, you know, and I'm not degrading my father. These are things that I've said to his face, right? And I also said them in his eulogy, and his wife, she thanked me. I said, can I say these things? She said, yeah, you know, it is what it is, you know, but he changed in his latter years. Coming into his latter years before he passed away, he changed a lot, but we weren't around, right? So one of the things that I saw was I didn't want to see, I saw how alcohol took away nearly everything that people work so hard to accomplish. So we lost a beautiful home because of alcohol. I saw him lost nearly everything, and I saw my uncles lose and lose and lose and lose. So I made the decision that I'm not going to be a drinker, an alcoholic. And people ask me a lot, you know, well, why don't you drink or whatever? I don't drink for a number of reasons. One of them is my faith, but I mean, I have a glass of wine periodically and stuff. But I'm talking about like these guys could drink a bottle of rum
like fish
without chasers, right? Without I'm serious drinking, right? Yeah. And I tell them I don't do that, not because I can't do it, because my father introduced me to alcohol when I was about 9 years old. I do it because I don't do it because I see what it can do when it begins to rule your life, right? And I taught that to my children as well. I think we all have that list of things that we we say that we don't want to do because of what we saw with our fathers. So that was one of the things on my list. And then one of the other thing was was not to come to the end of my life and have lost everything that I worked for.
Yeah.
Yeah, pass some stuff, pass something on.
Yeah, pass something on to your family. And
I think legacy is important, and coming from places where that's not common, hasn't been common historically for us. Folks who look like us always starting over because of a death.
That's right.
We have to move. We don't have. Oh, there was nothing.
Right.
We have to try another way now. And those are the kind of things you learn from. I know, my mom married a man who, for a few years, was my stepfather, and I could tell he was trying, but he also drank a lot. He's a good man when he wasn't drinking. Unfortunately, he drank a lot. You could see him trying. You could see that he was probably doing better than he had seen before. But the lessons he was teaching me was that same one you got, was maybe I need to stay away from this bottle stuff because you seem to be a completely different person when you're doing that, and you do that a lot. Now, the other thing for me was not knowing the biological makeup of my father and being a little guy back in the day. I was trying to figure out how to get to college, and my mom didn't have the money. So I was intent on not doing drugs, smoking. I got to be just as fast as I can possibly be, and I need to top out at the height I'm supposed to potentially get to. And if that stuff is going to mess that up, I can't afford to do that because no one's paying. I got to get some help. So for me, it was more of the, if I'm gonna get to the place where I can be a giver, a helper, a contributor, these are some of the things I just can't do because I don't if I'm addicted,
Right.
or
If you're prone to that,
if I
yeah.
try it
Yeah.
and it gets me, I'm done. So a lot of that was literally I got to get to at least, I hope, 5'11". I'm 5'3", and I'm tied with the girl down the hall as the shortest people in the fifth grade. Hey, so some of that you're just seeing that could deter me, and this might help me. So I'm gonna try to do those things, and then those are the things I try to pass on. The irony is my son Kendall. He hasn't had a drink, and he's paying attention to the whole. He said, "Well, if you don't know if you're dad, well, then how do I know? Because you didn't do any of these things. I don't need to be going down those paths.
Wow.
Because what if it is in us? They're listening even when you don't think they're listening to what you do, and they're watching, which is a good thing. If you get up going, I'm gonna do things in a way that would never embarrass my family. Now, Terry White did that. Mother White don't have to worry about. Yeah, he did do that. Not he did what?
Right. That's right.
You trying to make sure.
That's a different question.
Yeah.
Right.
I used to tell my oldest boy Nico, like, if when he's going on hanging out with his friends. Now, if you guys gonna be doing anything you're not supposed to be doing, make sure you use a different last name than the one I gave you.
Wow.
I don't want to read about that.
Right.
I don't want to see about that. My mom used to be like, I'm not coming to. I've never been to the jail, and I'm never going. If you go to jail, you use that phone call on someone else because I'm not coming.
Wow.
Yeah. So we talk about showing up in public. We talk about showing up in school. We talk a little bit about law enforcement. So let's talk a little bit about the value of education. How do we see the value of education changing the trajectory of life for our children?
I mean, it's significant, right? To me, I was the second oldest, so second born, middle child. My father was the first in his family to graduate from college. And I was second. And it wasn't without the challenges, but I knew that was my path to opportunity. But what I didn't know is it was also a path to understanding and loving my community as well, because I was able to go away to school to Morehouse College you know, and they have this thing where when you get there as a freshman, they say, look to your right, look to your left, that person's not going to be there. And I think a part of the reason why they say that is you have this precious opportunity and respect it, but also you have this responsibility that if you hear and you made it, you got to get back. And then the kind of the power of walking the same steps as Dr. Martin Luther King, it does something. And you go into buildings where these names that you haven't heard growing up in the Pacific Northwest, but everybody else seems to know it in the community. And maybe it's important to say, like, we have a legacy of intellect, right? And that's what I tell my boys. We have a legacy of intellect. Just because maybe the images that you see contradict that. I think I heard Michael Bennett. Oh man, I thought it was pretty powerful. I got to meet Michael Bennett, and he kind of described himself as, I'm proud of being the descendants of slaves because we made it. We here. But to go back to the topic of education, like a lot of Black colleges were founded on that. But that was, to me, my aha moment. No playing around. Even though you kind of you got to take this seriously. And then I thought about my brothers who were back at home, and I had two younger ones. And I wanted them to have the same opportunity and see the things that I saw, because I showed back up in Washington just different. And it's also about the power of who you have around you. I saw a legacy of the benefits of education and intellect, and that's how you get generational wealth as well. But let me stay on topic, because I think we were all talking about showing up at school. My wife and I, we made the commitment we was going to have kids. We're going to show up to everything. And I think the way I remember it is I want to make sure, well, my dad did this for me, but, you know, the reason why we do it is my son has a name. He comes from a family, and we're going to always be here and show up. And our expectations are high expectations for them. And so whatever you need, please call us, and we will support you. And we're going to be clear. We're going to be knowing every component of what they're learning, and we're going to reinforce it. I guess I'll education side. My grandfather, Johns Island, South Carolina, leveraged his military service to get an education, you know, with their version, or the African-American version of the GI Bill, right? So he was able to continue his education, and found the first heroin treatment facility in the area, Therapeutic Health Services. And he used that actually to connect with the Black community, help the Black community. And from that, just the connections that he made, you know, and to know he kind of did that after his adulthood, but he knew that was his path. And to the day he died, he was an executive of a hospital, but he did it late in life. I think he was over 30 when he went back to school. And I always tell my kids the story about investing in your education. You have options when you do that. You have no options if you don't have no education. You have limited options, and the way this society is built, you have less than your fellow person that isn't African American.
Right.
So I just wanted to,
I think
that power of education.
7%, 30% conundrum.
Yes.
And what happens to uneducated Black boys? Same type of thing.
Yeah.
And while it hurts to know that you might have to work harder to get your education or to get more of it just to keep your spot or to rise, it's kind of a thing you share.
Right.
This might hurt a little bit, but you're going to have to do a little more than maybe your neighbor.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
And
just the fact that
hurts, and it's not fair. You're right. I acknowledge that. And a mentor of mine would say to me, when I said, "Man, how do I move up in this organization? I got my degree," and he said, "Well, how's that working out for you?" It's not. Well, then maybe you should get another one. Get another one. How is this? That's not fair. Yeah. He said, "Well, you could cry and sit on the porch, or you could cry and get off the porch. I'm not saying that it don't hurt and you shouldn't cry, but are you going to cry and do nothing about it? You see that it's not working for you. Do a little more." I tell my kids that whole, when someone asks for who's going to step forward, who's going to raise their hand, who's going to voice the thing, that's your opportunities. And I don't want to have to be the person who, I get it. However, if you're trying to get to a place that you said you wanted to get to, I'm just telling you these are the things that you might have to do to get there.
To get there.
And that's the thing I think you tell your kids over and over that you hope they're hearing you say is the journey is going to be a little tougher maybe because of how you look. But you kind of got to go there. You got to go there because the alternative.
You don't have an option.
It's not.
Yeah.
And you see that. And you might be, in some ways, I look at it and go, I should have been where I got earlier. But it's just, the journey is tough.
Yeah. We are starting from a little bit farther back.
We are.
A little bit farther back than they are, right? We're hoping that we're pushing them ahead.
With no blocks.
Yeah.
With no blocks.
Before you start, Andre, but I want to make it point out that when we talk about education, we're not just talking about a college education. You can also be a really good plumber or a really good electrician or a really good crane operator or a really good, mechanic. Those kind of people are making bank today.
For sure.
I remember when I found out how much a backhoe operator makes. Man, those got a good backhoe operator. I mean, those guys are like
elevator technicians are cleaning up.
Elevator technicians and stuff.
Cleaning up.
These skills. It's just like you can be so many things. So when we talk about education, we're talking about find something that you love and be good at it. Be good at it. If you like using your hands, be hands. If you're good at intellect, be at the intellect, but not just que sera type approach to life. But that's from the financial point of view. But if we think about it from the societal point of view, it also, like you said, it provides opportunities when you become good at something and you're known for that. And pretty soon people will honor you and respect you regardless of your color just because of what you do, because you're really good at it.
Yeah, for sure.
And Terry, you always talk about, not everybody's going to become an NBA and an NFL player. Right? So you got to...
Really, none of them.
Right.
None of you are.
The statistics are. They speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I think, too, speaking about jobs that people have looked down upon, especially for a person of color to have said job. My mother's father was a custodian. He was the first African-American staff person in the entire Detroit public school system. First person of color to ever be hired by Detroit public schools, and he was hired as a custodian. But he took it upon himself to create a custodial school and trained other black males, young boys, guys that came out of high school and didn't have ambition or money or opportunity or grades or to move to enter into the custodial school. And he used that money to send his only child, my mother, to Michigan State and paid for her education for 4 years at Michigan State on a custodian's salary. Mm-hmm. And so, again, when we talk about this idea that, it's a little bit tougher for us, we don't always get the student loans and, having to work while you're also going to school while somebody else is
just going.
They're just rolling and not really going. They just there, you know what I'm saying? And they cramming 4 years into 6 because they can. You know what I'm saying?
That's good.
And then, you know, there's the struggle of being a person of color once you're there.
Right.
Just getting in, it's kind of like this idea of mismanagement or stewardship of wealth. Just because you can attain something doesn't mean you can maintain or sustain the thing. You got to budget for both. Just because you can buy it doesn't mean you can keep it.
Right.
And so there were 22,000 students in 1958 when my mother entered into Michigan State, and there were 200 African Americans, so less than 1%. And when my mother walked into her English class, it's the big, you know, amphitheater class with, you know, it's gen ed requirements. There's 250 plus students in the class, then professor called the only African American down to the front of the class, which was my mother, and he said, "I just want to make sure you know you can't get an A in my class." And she said, "I beg your pardon." He said, "I just want you to know you can't get an A in my class because no one who looks like you has ever successfully finished my class." That was the first day when the syllabus came out. So these are, you know, as people of color, especially, and that's a female. So when you start talking about black boys, that's a different conversation of some additional adversity associated with this idea of higher education. So I'll say this out close. So my grandfather on my father's side, my father's father did not finish high school and had 11 children. My dad is number 10 of 11. And my dad was the second to finish high school. His older sister, Liz, finished high school. So my father saw his sister finish and said, saw he could finish. But like I said, he finished at 16, and then he became the first to finish college. But I just say this about, you know, Terry talking about his father, the relationship now, and Terry's 50 plus, but there's a connection, right, with the dad. And same thing with Deshaun. There's a connection, even though there was divorce. There's connection with the dad. And Grantley, even so, my grandfather told my father and my Uncle Frankie, which was number 10, my dad's 10, and Uncle Frankie's 11, that he could place a roof over their head, but he couldn't feed them and he couldn't clothe them when my dad was 11 and his brother Frankie was 9. And I never really understood, like, what is that about? Like, you got kids and you can't, why did you have so many if you can't? Yeah. But I found out later in my life that my grandmother had an affair. And the reason my father is so much darker than his family is because my grandfather is not my father's biological father.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then she had a second affair, and my Uncle Frankie was born by another man. But my grandfather let them both stay in his house and was a father to them. And so when you talk about the resilience and the love to want to see black boys make it, he said, I gotta feed these 9. They gotta get the. So he taught my dad and my Uncle Frankie how to shine shoes at Fox Theater downtown Detroit, so they could earn the money to buy powdered milk and clothes from the Goodwill, while he housed them and gave them a place to sleep. And to see what transpired in my dad's life by the choices he made with education, because he saw that as the way out. Now, of course, the pendulum swung a bit far, because by the time I came along, I was that kid that, you know, everybody else is outside playing football or basketball in the street, you know, or foursquare, you know, with the ball on the lines on the cement, or chasing possums in the alley. But I'm that kid that had to do the homework after the homework. So whatever worksheet I got when I came home, after it was finished, then my father would go down on my mother and go into the filing cabinet downstairs and pull out that same sheet with 15 more questions. Yep. And so there was never, where's your homework? Oh, I ain't got no homework. Oh, no, that's not. You always have homework. And after you finish it and we grade it, then we need you to go get that worksheet, drawer number 3, get these math problems out. But I
What would you think? What was the expectation? What did you think the expectation was for you in a house with doctors?
Right. And it was one of those, this just comes with it. Like, don't need to debate it. This just comes with it. And then my dad never heard of the term timeout. My dad didn't know what restriction was. Like, my dad was a leather conference man. Everything was resolved with a conference. So
Well said.
Just because you make it doesn't mean that everybody's going to make it easy for you to stay there. And we got to teach our children that, right? You may get in the door, but you got, whether it's academics or sports or whatever, just because you made it on the team doesn't mean you're going to start if you don't work hard.
Right. Yeah. Just enough is not enough.
Let's talk about some of the joys of seeing your children begin to do better than you did, or come up with questions that you couldn't answer. It's like, well, I got to go and research that, because now they're not just looking to do better than you, but they're like stepping out ahead of you, and now you're the one trying to catch up with them.
This whole college athlete thing, there's some things that come along with that you have to be guarded against if you intend to actually stay an athlete for the entire 4 years you're there, unless you're going to leave early to, head to the league or something of that nature. But I was telling those stories to my son early on because he was saying, Dad, I want to go D1. I want to be on scholarship when I go to college. And I'm saying, son, that's great, but there are folk there, whether they're boosters or whether they're young ladies who like the fact that you're an athlete and might be going somewhere, or they see, this or that about you that might hinder you from actually ever accomplishing your own goal of being on scholarship for the time that you're there and graduating. And so middle of our son's, the end of his second semester as a freshman, he called us one time and said, I just want y'all to know I decided I'm not going to date while I'm in college. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you say that now, but it's a bunch of honeys on the yard. I don't know if you're gonna make that one, Reverend, but I hear you though. I hear what you're saying. And by his junior year, he had still never been on a date at Washington State University, which had the party school reputation and blah 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 blah. He was the fastest on the squad as a wide receiver, fastest person on the squad, fastest 4.3 time, and he called us one time and said, hey, football's not my thing. I wanted to prove to myself that coming from a 1A Christian school, I could do it. Now that I know I can, they want too much of your time. That's your life. I'm going to stay with track, run these hurdles. He said, but Dad, there's a girl on the track team. She's really nice. She's having a party. A lot of football players and track guys are going. I think I'm going to go. I'm like, son, you don't need to be telling me where you go on the weekend. That's that's you. So I get a call about 3 a.m, right? So that's never good when you get a call after midnight from your kids, period. And I said, son, what's going on? He said, I just want to talk to you. I'm over here at Denny's. I went, but it wasn't for me. I'm a junior. I hadn't been to a party in 3 years. I'm hanging because I went with the football players, and now that's my ride. They still there. So I walked down to Denny's. It's 24 hours. I'm waiting for them to come pick me up. And so I just was like, yeah, you on a different page than your daddy was, for sure. you doing it totally different than I did, which is beneficial, for you to be an African-American male, to be 33 years old, to be a virgin. It's not something we talk about, but that comes from the amount of time that was spent communicating some of the challenges and the shortfalls and the poor choices that I made as a black male scholarship athlete. That he heard that, and it wasn't you need to some kind of way he put it together. You know what? That was funny, but that wasn't beneficial. So here's what I'm going to do. But anyway, that's just when you talk about being excited about what the next generation is doing. He'll be able to say to his son, this is how he walked through 5 years at Wazoo, and this is how he kept himself to be able to say to his wife one day that these are the choices I made prior to saying I do, which His mama could say that at the altar, but his father certainly couldn't.
Yeah. I think there's some beauty in the whole, they actually are listening to you. If you are committed to saying it, sometimes over and over and over, they're hearing you. Sometimes they don't want to hear it because it's contrary to what they're thinking at the moment, but it's still getting in there. Mm-hmm. And then you get to see the benefit of it later. I know from mine, same thing. It was well, you went to a D1 school. Well, yeah, but they didn't help me do anything. I had to get in the back of the line like everybody else. So let's look at some of these other schools that are more academic minded. Graduation rates are 90-some%. Let's talk about some of these because you could still play. And I remember with my oldest, I was like, if you go D1, you're going to maybe get to play 20 games. 20 games? What are you talking about? So, you're not going to play as a freshman. And you might play a few and get on the field. You'll probably do special teams more than anything else. And then you're going to come into your own and get hurt and miss a few games. And then there's going to be some freshman that shows up as you're a senior.
That's all world.
Doubled. I said, so you'll get 20 games out. That's, 20 games. Or you can go to this other school, get this education where they're going to help you get on with your life because they have 90-something% graduation rate. And they actually have this group that helps you so you don't have to start in the back of the line. Now, those are the kind of choices you have. And you went D1. They're not listening to me. But turns out they are. And I think that, like, you get the phone call and I get Kendall and he's like, Dad, Kendall did run and start. And he did, so did Dominic. So they were early in where they were supposed to be. He had his AA at 18. He got his 4-year degree at 20, and he had his master's at 21. He said, yeah, I'm getting these phone calls to go play basketball over here, and they're offering me a master's, which I already have. But I already know I'm not really going to go. I'm not going to the league, and I don't have an interest in going overseas, so I'm going to go ahead and take this teaching job and do this so that I can start helping kids get their educations and start moving through life. That's that phone call where you're like
moving ahead, right?
Is this guy?
Right.
Is this the same? I'm going to North Carolina.
Right.
Breaking all the so-and-so records. Now he's telling me he's turning down so he can get started with helping.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That's the
That's so good.
Can I just add one thing? My kids are young, 10 and 15. So not unlike your children, my eldest son is going to start running start next year. But when I I'm in the moment, right? Because I think the surprising thing when you are a father is you got to let go of that want to do it for them, right? And leave space so they can figure it out. And my two boys are mentally strong, comfortable with being emotional when they need to be, not being raised, I think, from all the generations before them. And a term is a term, and I think it's a relevant term. You're right, the toxic masculinity. For us, it was just a normal experience. But to see this sense of responsibility and connection, but mental strength, right? This piece around, if you have to read, being comfortable with going to therapy if you need it, talking about the hard things in our household, which we never did, right? Whatever happened to so-and-so, oh, well, they lost their house to probate, right? But now they're talking about investments at a young age. I think about my eldest son, just the work ethic. Look, I played football, and I did it the old school way. Show up out of shape. my son did, right? And then you get in shape
during the 2 days.
During 2 days. And then,
2 days.
so whether it be between nutrition, but even just my son, he just finished his I think it's his 3rd year in track. He runs 100, the 400, the 4x1. I say it all that he's willing to try different things until he found a thing that he liked. And the day after the school was kind of done competing, he's out because his dad, can you give me this thing from for my training, parachute, whatever. Next day he's out there and then talking about his plan. So they got a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, we were trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to stay there, as we talked about. But I think my boys are, again, when I think about the generational, maybe not curses, but just generational experiences, but being able to develop new ones.
Yeah, turn the corner. See them moving ahead of you at the same when you were that age.
Exactly right.
For sure.
And my 3 brothers,
sure.
they have that kind of investment in their children as well. So they are at a better starting place. But again, the experience around not being satisfied or just getting there, because you got to stay there, and the level of support will be there, but you got to go find it.
Got to find it.
And people do want to kind of see you not win.
And you can't let that deter you. So this is a good place to turn, and as we sort of round for home, is here's, the biblical foundation for all the stuff that we're talking about, right? We're all 4 of us are believers, Christ followers and stuff. Let's talk about some of the biblical foundations that surround the things that we're talking about. The Bible obviously has examples of good fatherhood and not good fatherhood. But what would you say are some of the biblical foundations for some of the principles you've used in raising your boys and that you're hoping for them going in the future?
Yeah, I would say, so I even though I grew up in a Christian home, education was the God of my house. My dad didn't come to any of my sporting events. And that was on purpose. He wanted to help me understand where the value was. The value was in the academics. The value wasn't in the athletics. But we didn't have Bible study, formally. My dad wasn't gathering the family together after dinner or at the dinner table and opening the Bible. It was required to go to church. It wasn't an option. Like, well, Dad, I don't feel like that wasn't a discussion. And if you weren't healthy enough to go to church, you wasn't going nowhere that day. It wasn't like, well, I don't feel good this morning. Then later on, you want to go outside and that's not. And if you spent the night over somebody's house on Saturday, either you had to have it worked out where they were going to drop you off in time enough to get to church, or you weren't going to whoever's house it was if you couldn't do church in the morning. So with my kids, I wanted them to be able to have a place where they could ask questions about what they were experiencing at church or what they were experiencing with Bible study based on what was happening in school, like what was happening in their life. So there'd be movies that their friends were going to that we didn't advocate. We weren't willing to let them go unless they were willing to write a paper, 1-page paper, on what it was in the movie that was contrary to what they had been taught.
Wow.
So instead of just saying no, you can't, because it's got this, it's got that, it's got this other thing. It was, well, you can go, but this is what you got to do to be able to go. And sometimes that would be like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. I don't need to go.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the music. There'd be certain, music that was out there that their friends were listening to, and they'd be like, well, I want to get, and I want to MTV raps, and I want to, okay, well, no, but if you want to do it, then you need to actually play it and tell us what it is about it that you know is contrary to the script, and why is that not in keeping with what God is saying, And so sometimes that would be enough to, and other times they'd be like, yeah, I'm writing the paper because I'm definitely going to go see the so-and-so. So when can we go,
Already got the paper written.
Right. But I listen to my kids now as adults, and they say that, the whole PK thing, wasn't our life experience because for whatever reason, you and mom allowed us to experience things that our peers were experiencing, but we had to use the scripture and find places where, so we know that's not right, but we don't know where it is. So then the next assignment was, well, you don't have to write a paper, but you have to find the Bible verses for these 10 things that I looked at when I saw it. And here are the 10 things that are contrary. I need you to tell me, where do you find that in the Bible? Yeah. And we would go back and forth. So I think when my daughter says to me, okay, Dad, I don't know why that's not right, but that's not right, what that person just said. We listen to a podcast and they're supposed to be Christian and they da-da-da. And I can't tell you where you find it that is wrong, but it's something in my like it's something off about, you know, and you go, wow. So that foundation that you laid early on where you were gathering the family together and having casual conversation about whatever it was that was happening. And we had decided that our kid, again, for us, our kids were required to go to private Christian school, kindergarten through 8th grade. Then they had the choice to go wherever they wanted to go for high school. We just wanted to lay the foundation first. My son was he was playing football. We went to the 5A powerhouse for high school, met with the athletic director, went to lunch period, about 300 folks throwing food and cursing, going crazy. He was like, "Oh no, I'm good, Dad. I'm heading back over to the joint." My daughter was saying, "I don't care where I go, I ain't staying here. You can see me. I ain't gonna go visit nobody. Just as long as you know I'm not gonna finish here."
Right. I grew up with my mom, Bible study at the table, to the point where you start to go, "Hey, didn't we study this already?" Start turning into reruns or something. I already know this. I know this part. Well, good. But I got it, and I knew she would leverage what I was learning in real life, and I just picked that up. So I would take that with my kids. So the whole mindset of sitting at the table and going through your Bible study lessons. At the time, not knowing that's devotionals.
Right.
Right.
Oh, no. Okay. Yes, that's devotional. But sitting there and trying to instill what you heard, what you read into everyday life and the choices you make. And I've always been this kind of, are you going to be a giver or a taker? Are you going to be a servant leader, servant? Or are you going to be a iron-fisted, because I said so, and not benevolent enough to understand that you need a team to go with you, and they need to be a part of your decision-making so that you can make way for those who are coming after you, because that's really what it's about. It was never really about just you. Right. When your time comes and they ask, well, what did you give? What did you do? Yeah. And it's not going to, I don't know if anybody in the line is going to say, well, I made a lot of money at the time, because they're going to go, oh, I guess it wasn't really about, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So I try to get that part through to my kids as that spiritual piece of, and here's where it shows that is about how you serve others. And to much whom is given, much is expected. That's not Spider-Man. That's Luke. Right. So you get that. Yes, they try to. That's biblical. And then to watch your kids start to go into that area, I think that's a big piece for me. Beyond it's not just about making it. It's not just about you.
That's not motivation.
And then tying all that other stuff in, the financial piece, which I didn't get growing up. I had bad credit for a long time because nobody ever told me that you're not supposed to fill that thing out and send it in immediately for that 23% credit thing, just so that you get a stereo and pay for it for the next 8 years or whatever it was.
Right.
Pay for it 3 times.
Right.
But that whole, when you get your money, this is what you should do. This is all you really need. Is that a want versus a need, and have that mindset growing up so that they're ready, because the more you understand those pieces, the more you get to get around to serving. And that's your blessing. I mean, of course you feel good when you see, there's nothing better than seeing someone you helped doing something, and then they're doing it. And I think for us, it's just rare for us to hear about the good. that you see black men doing. We're just quick to see and then they did this and shot up this over here, and this over here was and the thing went bankrupt. We don't get to hear a lot of all that incredible stuff that happens.
Right.
But it's out there, and we see it. And I feel good that I think the things we do with our kids, especially when you push that for me, leader servant type of, you're here to serve. You're here to lead a life that might cause someone else who's struggling to go, I need to figure out what you do. So that
That's
can,
good.
because I'm struggling. And you in the same pool as I am, and you seem okay with this.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of peace you got? That whole, I know I'm going to be okay. And I think it comes from that first piece of, no matter what, you was there. You were there.
You were over there.
You were there. And that's a different place when you're, that's that whole, like, I'm trying to be like your Father in heaven. He's there. He's there. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to try to do these things for you. And it gives them some calm as they try to make it through, because they got to fall back.
That's right.
They got to fall back. Now, what they do with that on the next piece, I'm looking forward to hearing about that one.
It's up to them, yeah. We grew up in the house just like you guys, and my mother did devotionals and stuff like that. We were always in church, involved in youth group, involved in anything, got involved in music. You know, I started playing the band Christian band when I was 13 years of age. And, started playing the tambourine, worked my way all the way up. But, you know, that really helped me growing up, and it helped me formulate a lot of my values. When I went to college by myself, I was in a predominantly white college, and to me, it really came out about how you live it, right? Now I'm on my own. There's nobody there. There's nobody's left. You can do whatever you want to do. And that's when it really came out to me about how do you live this life that you're supposed to live. You know, I had this mentor who was teaching me as well. But that's when it really struck me that, you know, you could go to college and do whatever you want to do, because your parents aren't there, there's nobody there, you're in another country. You know? It's not like you're down the street, you know. But when I got my kids, you know, I would admit that I was not very good about having the devotions around the table. You know, we tried that, and I was never consistent in that. But I tried to make sure that our kids were in the Word, you know, involved in youth group, involved in Sunday school, involved in quizzing. We had friends around them, had Christian friends around them, service projects, local, national, international, you know, and seeing, again, it's not about them. How do you serve others? How do you live this life? And some days I wonder, you know, if we even did it right. You know, a lot of people kid about, you know, when you have kids, there's no manual. And I think about that all the time. And I think back, you know, about all the ways we raise our children. It would have been good to know that. It would have been good to do that. It would have been good to do that. But you're doing it as you go, right?
For sure.
And you're trying to teach them the best. You know, and that's always been on my mind with my children as they're working out their faith, you know. But I see it in them, the things that they do, the way they talk, the way they help people, the way they're concerned about people. You know, they call us and ask us to pray for friends, that kind of stuff. They welcome strangers into their home. You know, they give to people who need to be given to. You know, my kids always talk about how many people we always had in our home, every holiday, everything. Because my wife and I, when we were in college, many times we were alone by ourselves because we were foreign students and everybody took off with their families and stuff, and we were alone by ourselves. Or some people invited us to their house, but sometimes we really didn't fit in. So we sort of made this promise after we got married that we would make our house to be the place where people who didn't have anywhere to go would come when they would come.
That's good.
And when you talk to our children now, they tell you, I remember those days. I remember these people coming. I remember serving. I remember going on that trip to Alaska or going on and helping out people. You know, and we were talking to our son the other day, and he said, he was telling his wife and stuff, he said, I remember that Thanksgiving we had at our house, and we had all of these people from all around the world, and we said Thanksgiving grace in 7 languages. So, but the Bible gives us, we talk about the biblical foundation. The Bible gives us, train up a child in the way they should grow, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And I struggled with that for a while, and then I was at church back in Utah, and I was really worried about, have I done a good job as a father raising my children? And one of the associate pastors, she came up to me, I remember Bridget Waters, and she said, "Do you believe what the Word of God says?" And I said, "Yes." She says, "Well, it says that if you brought up those children in the way that they should grow, that someday it is not going to depart, and someday it's going to come back. Do you believe that?" And I said, "Yes." So she said, "Well, all you got to do now is wait for it to happen."
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. I believe it's very true. We do all we're supposed to do. We're all over on the spectrum, on time and distance and all of it. And ultimately, the one thing you taught them early on was faith. Have some faith. Yeah. So you got to have it too. When it comes to, did we do what we were supposed to do? And you sit back, and I know Danae and I have them kind of conversations all the time. Well, let God do what he's supposed to do, though. You say what you're supposed to do. You be where you're supposed to be. And could you have done more? Probably. But hey, you could have done less, too.
Yeah.
So in the end, you can't save them. He can.
Right.
That's so
And
good.
that's the truth part. But they every now and then they give you a little glimpse in, and you go, "Wow, you was paying a little attention to what Pop was saying."
My daughter told me that one day.
I listened to
she
you.
says-
I heard you.
She said to me, she says, "You didn't think I was listening to you when you were talking to me, did you?" And I said, "Well, some days I wondered." Some days I wondered.
I think too, always reminding our boys in particular that life is about choices.
Mm-hmm.
And, that phrase, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you choosing to spend time with, and who's in your circle, and why are they in your circle? What motivated you to be with that person? And using passages like 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad behavior corrupts good character. Mm-hmm. Or Exodus 23:2, do not follow the crowd in wrongdoing. Mm-hmm. 1 Timothy 5:22, do not share in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. This whole idea, well, Johnny was doing it, me and Johnny. Yeah, no, bro, that's not.
That's not the standard.
I know you and Johnny want to be you. Right. That's your dude, but as soon as Johnny go left, you got to let him go left by himself. Mm-hmm. And learn that maybe Johnny's not the guy you thought he was. Right. And so my wife came up with this MRC. MRC became the phrase for the kids, which stood for make right choices. So when they would leave the house, they said, well, "Bye, Dad." Well, MRC, this idea. You're going to have some choices out there tonight that we aren't going to be privy to.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And we're encouraging you to make right choices. You've been trained what the choices are, but ultimately you have to make them.
I think the earlier you start with your kids, with any types of sayings, and this is what I believe, and you are who you hang out with, when they're young, they catch that stuff early. Mm-hmm. It's like saying you are obviously brilliant when they're real little.
That's right.
So they really are taking to what you say, and then later on, depending on how you cultivate those teachings, it does. I do the whole who do you associate with? Mm-hmm. What are they going to become? Mm-hmm. When they were little, I was doing that, and I could see them picking and choosing, and in some cases being worried about how I might feel about who they're hanging out with. I couldn't, even if it was they. I knew you wasn't gonna like them, so I just didn't even bother. They didn't have it all yet, but later on, you start to see that manifest more, and these are the people I associate with. And it's about all of those things. Doing right, being ambitious. wanting to become something. And if you're associating with that, you say get with like-minded people. Even date people who will understand what it is you're trying to be because they're trying to be.
Yeah.
And it becomes that kind of those are also the kind of choices you make. Good, bad choices. People. Same thing. How you're going to serve, how you're going to live. And it starts to help you because it's like going to the gym. You might do well if you go and it's just you, but certain days you don't want to go for whatever reason. And if you've associated with the right people, they can get you there.
Right.
You're not going? Come on, man. It's just I'll come through and get you. You get those kind of folks around you, and they can get you through some of them moments. Versus are you gonna raise him up or he gonna take you down?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which way is this gonna go? Because if you don't think you can raise him up, why are you still associating? This is not gonna work out well. They're taking you down. Well, I know it's going to take me down. Well, I'm just telling you what I'm seeing right now. Proof is in the pudding. And I let my kids go and, okay, I had to cut her loose. I had to cut her loose because that's not what I want to do. Okay,
Right.
good. Because that's the thing. You try to put them into places.
Right.
Tell them all the things. And it's in them. That's what I believe. That's the faith part. That I did all of this, and then a big piece of everything is prayer.
Yeah.
I think as men raising black boys, you got to go in there with prayer first, almost all the time. Okay, help me to say the right stuff, Lord, and when I get here, and if it goes off on a tangent, please help me keep up with it.
That's funny.
So I feel better knowing that I sought it out. I sought out some prayer before I walked into a situation.
Yeah.
And then I tend to have much better peace. I'm good. It's gonna play out the way you want it to play out. And I did the thing you asked me to do, was seek you first before I go. Yeah. And now I'm gonna just let it be.
Let it play out, yeah. Trust. Trust.
And I say that, I'll say that, and I'll say that, and I'll say that. And there's still times where I'm not feeling good about it. And I'm having a conversation. I'm having like a father conversation too. Now, Lord, you told me.
Right.
I don't see it. Right. I'm not saying it. Are you coming? What, But hey, that's the place where your faith has to be there too.
Yep.
For your boys, for the boys that they gonna have.
Right. Generations.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Deshaun?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's how I was raised. My mom, and she still is the person I call when we talk about scripture. And I think, she's that rock. I don't think I would be choosing the career that I have now, right? Whether it be elected official, in service, transit, serving others, without that foundation, because there are a lot of challenges that we have in society. And the responsibility that comes with those roles, it's not always fun. So you have to have some foundation. And I remember it was probably a tactic, although my mom grew up in the church. She made sure we grew up in the church. So as y'all said, we was doing youth group, confirmation. We were doing bake sales. We were at everything. And that was my mom. She didn't play that. We knew we had to show up, and we talked scripture. But I would just say she's my rock because it doesn't matter what I'm going through, and I hope she can be there as long as she can be there. She's kind of like my pastor. She'll break out verse in a minute, and it always is helpful, no matter what's going on. And I'm doing that for my boys. And I'm also having them spend time with her because I think all my challenges that I've ever had, she was always there. And I remember, not that I've done some things in life, and I'm proud of the service that I continue to be involved in. I show up and kind of give to others. But the one time she told me specifically that she was proud of me was we put on this event for the community, Feed the Community. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I ever heard her full-throated say, I'm very proud of you. And it wasn't for these things and these titles that I gained, but that we were building community. And I know where she got it from because my grandmother was a founder of the church in Johns Island, South Carolina. So you can just imagine there's a few churches, but not many. Mm-hmm. That's where she's buried, and she got her pew seat, and still ain't nobody sitting in it. And I have two uncles that are ministers, but for me it was a lifestyle, and it probably was, as I reflect on it, it was how she kind of got through raising 4 boys on her salary. And we would pray whenever things were good and challenging. And that's what I was taught, and that's what I teach my boys. And I have to say, like, it does build your character. Mm-hmm. It gives you some guardrails on how far you should go. So, I think the choices that I made was because it was buried in being taught and learning the Bible and being a good Christian and having a sense of responsibility. I think the first one was that I remember, and it was probably out of fear, was out of thy father always. Yeah. Right. But I also think it's also that you don't write off family. And so kind of going back to my relationship with my dad, like it was never an option. We were always going to get back together. But I just think about the foundation because again, just being exposed to all those activities, giving back, and why you give back, and being of service. I find it hard if you don't have that foundation because there's so much there to say. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to carry every day, every decision. And I found myself even, just kind of, we all have challenges, but to have friends and mentors that you can pick up the phone and they reinforce maybe something your mother said, right? Mm-hmm. Terry, plenty of times where you reflect on a scripture that my mom would always tell me, or Grantley, just your resiliency and being able to reflect on the way I was raised, it just keeps you centered and balanced and focused. Mm-hmm. And it's easier to then be a parent to a child, and you also have to tell them the reason why you are balanced and focused, and that is that just being grounded in the Bible and being a Christian and reading the Word and understanding why we do the things that we do, and don't be left to your own devices. There is a way, right? Yeah. And so
you don't have to wing it the whole time.
You don't wing it.
So let's sort of wrap it up by talking about what's our hopes for our boys, our boys and young men and men now, as we look forward.
I think the thing I try to pass to my boys is they're supposed to be better fathers than I was. They should have been paying attention enough that they take the good, they throw out the bad, and they get better. And they're apologetic about the things that they don't do well with their kids so they can see that coming up. And instill in their kids what I was trying to get into them was that I truly believed something great for them coming. You guys are going to be amazing. I don't know what at. I don't know how, but I know I'm supposed to be here doing this thing to make sure you get that opportunity to be incredible people, incredible givers. And I say that whole, you start early, because if you say your kid can fly at 2, they believe you. Right. That's true. Start to try and figure out how to be great then, how to serve better. And if they do that, then that whole, Deshaun is just an anomaly. Pastor Sims is, but he's different. and how do we get beyond, when we had this conversation, how do we get beyond the point of, well, you got in because, and you know, but,
That's right.
but we not calling anybody else.
Right.
We need to get our boys to grow up in a way that it starts to become, do you have any other people you know that we should be reaching out to? Mm-hmm. That becomes more of the commonplace than this anomaly mindset of there's not many. So how do we break some of them biases down? Mm-hmm. And I think that's our jobs as the men who are raising black boys, is to instill in them how hard it might be, but you got to go, and you're going to be great.
That's so good.
You just reminded me of something that about being a father. You end up seeing yourself in little different ways in your kids. Mm-hmm. And I think about being there, not so much to correct it, but to inform it through my life experience, right? So my youngest son is emotional, really hard on himself, and he's strategic, and for me, it's over processing. So being able to give to him a way to process. So that's my hope, is just seeing what we see in our children and giving them the tools to be successful. And then I think the other thing is being able to practice love and joy and celebrating it. That would be amazing. And so my responsibility is to create those spaces and tell them they should be unapologetic about love for others and actually experiencing joy. And I think maybe the last thing is we're all a part of a legacy, and you don't always know what part you play in that legacy. So my hope is that they will, again, take the mantle or stand it on shoulders and pick up that legacy and create and be unafraid to step out and contribute to actually making this world a better place. Whether they say, I don't want to prepare my kids, that's funny, I just wrote this, for the hardships of the world, the disparities of the world. I want to prepare them for the possibilities. And so I kind of feel like that might be the biggest thing, because I know my father tried to do it for me and his father tried to do it for him, is to prepare them for the possibilities. How do I convey it? So they say, Dad, you're right. There are possibilities. And now that I'm in school and I'm not getting the help that I need, I'm going to push through it because you said, I got to make my way. So I think that's the biggest thing, is prepare them for the possibilities. And I hope they seize it and take it and be a part of their legacy.
Mm. Yeah, I certainly agree with both Terry and Deshaun as far as this limitless potential, right? It's this idea that Ephesians 3:20, he's able to provide more than you could ever ask or think. Mm-hmm. So my hope is that they continue to swing for the fences, because you never hit any home runs that you don't swing at,
right?
And that they don't need to be anything for me or their mother. They need to be authentically who God made them. And so the hope is that they will take the time to hear from their Heavenly Father and walk in that with the supernatural empowerment of the Holy Spirit. That's my hope, is that they live out their faith to the maximum degree, that the abundant life is their actual experience, not a passage that they can quote from John 10. It's like they are using their spiritual gifts with every born-again believer is most fulfilled when he or she is walking in the gifting that the Holy Spirit gave them, that's their desire, and then they actually see the fruit of that. Our daughter paid us a really high compliment, and I'll close with this. We were there for her birthday last week, and she's got this newer gentleman that's he's made it the furthest along. She's 29. And I said to her, I don't want to, disrespect you. I don't want to enter into your space, but I have a comment or two I'd like to make based on an observation with the young man. I would like you to be there so you can hear for yourself that your daddy, because she was like, Dad, you know how you do. The men see you and they, she said, I learned that in junior high, don't invite you to come to the class for nothing, because then I don't hear from no boys the whole year. And so you ripping phone books in my classroom is not good for my social life. So anyway, long story short, we finished the conversation. My wife, I felt like the Lord allowed us to say some things for the young man to know that we have interest in his spiritual life. It's not just about our daughter only. And I said to her, did you feel like I crossed any line in my discussion? She said, Dad, I'm not married. You're still my spiritual covering. And so I welcomed what you had to say until such a time as when somebody else is supposed to be. Right. And I thought, okay, that's what you're looking for. I'm treading light, trying not to, hit any landmines while I'm trying to drop this truth out there. And she was like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, that's, until I'm married, I'm taking my instruction from the one that God gave me. I just was like, okay, that's what you hope for.
That's pretty powerful. And I agree with all the things that you've said. I think we've all had similar experiences in some ways and different in other ways, raising our kids. But I think the hope is, to see them live out their full potential that God created them to be. Find that thing, that path that God has created for them, and to live it out to the fullest for themselves, and serving others with humility and honor and integrity. To raise the next generation that will even go further than we have gone, and we have seen them gone, with that hope and that anticipation that anything is possible, that they can do it. And to leave a legacy. We hope that we leave a legacy for our children, that they would be willing to pass on to their children and to their children's children. That is our hope. My biggest hope, is that they serve the Lord fully in their life, realizing that achieving what God created you to be is not a separate accomplishment from serving Him. Right? They're both tied within the same thing. Yeah. And I've been reading 1 Samuel these last few weeks, and the thing I know about Samuel is that he learned to hear. He could hear the voice, but he couldn't recognize it. And then Eli says, that's the voice, so learn to recognize it. And once he recognized it, he said to him, no, you got to do whatever he says. Even if it means you have to tell me things that I don't want to hear, because the first message was not positive, a compliment for Eli. Right? And Eli said, tell me everything, don't hold anything back. Right, so be truthful and honest. So my prayer for them is that they would find that relationship with God, learn to hear His voice, and learn to be obedient and do what He's asked them to do. But I'm also proud of my kids in terms of seeing them, already at this point in their life, accomplishing greater things and going farther than I even dreamed and imagined that I could get. Right, and seeing them do things that I could even, I thought I had a big imagination when I was young, but I watched my kids and I was like, man, they're doing things that I didn't even dream. I didn't even know was possible, and that's part of it. And then to see my son begin to now instill those things in his son, because he has a son, right? So now he is beginning to raise a boy now in the world. And I think that the last thing I would say is that to be able to learn to navigate the world, right? Because I realized the world that our children grew up in And even now, the world that our grandchildren is growing up in is completely different to the world that I grew up in. So how do we teach them to navigate the world? And the hope is that the same God who brought us this far will carry them as well, because they don't have a manual, just like we did. The manual we have is the Word of God. It's the Bible. It's prayer. It's the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for this time tonight. That we can sit around and talk.
Conversation.
Just a great conversation around the table. We don't know where it's going to go. Hopefully somebody will want to listen to it. But even if nobody listens to it, we learn from each other, and we hear from each other, about the things that we can continue to encourage each other on. And I just want to thank all of you three publicly for your part you play in my life, and encouraging me and being there and being available and being able to speak into my life, the things that I need to hear at the times I need to hear it.
That's mutual, brother.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's go raise some boys.